Welcome to the 24th floor. I'm Richard Denson alongside Ruben Diaz, and the Memphis Grizzlies once again at the center of a conversation around how NBA players view this city and the franchise.
Yeah, a new player poll ranked Memphis as the #1 NBA city the players don't want to get traded to. So on this episode, we're going to break down the perception that comes from that, why that's happening here in Memphis, why that keeps resurfacing, and maybe even why we're not hearing much from the front office about it.
So, Ruben, what was your initial reaction to that #1 ranking? Now, before you answer that, we do got to kind of give context. This was from The Athletic, and it was probably about 120 players, give or take, surveyed.
Yeah.
Still, though, when you see to the general public, Memphis #1, and it's 35%, and then the rest of the cities like Indiana,
yeah. So I pulled it up
11%.
It was Memphis at 35.8%, then Washington at nearly 12%, Sacramento at nearly 11%. Then it drops to single digits. You got New Orleans, Brooklyn, Utah, Charlotte, Portland, New York, Detroit at only 2.5%. So way more people would rather go to Detroit than come to Memphis. And then Indiana, Milwaukee, and LA. Indiana's always kind of gotten a little bit of that rep that it's a boring city for NBA players. But even still, at this point, Memphis is by far the city with getting the negative. So
what did you think about when you saw that? What was your reaction to it?
I thought it was just a timing thing. You know, when you've got people like LeBron and just some of the other stuff that's come out, you know, with the players that sparked up that conversation again. Then, of course, when you ask people where's the place you don't want to go, the first place on their mind is going to be the place that they've most recently been hearing about, right? And so then that's why Memphis, I think, becomes the #1 on that, is because it's been the most recent talking point when it comes to NBA players. I don't think it has necessarily as much to do with the current state of Memphis as much as it was the latest hot button place to talk about.
Because the Grizzlies not even the worst team in the league.
Yeah, but they're not talking about going to the league, like which team in the league you want to play for. They're talking about which city do you not want to live in.
Yeah.
And so when you look at those cities, you would say to yourself, if you haven't been to some of these, like, okay, you'd rather, which it says team, but ultimately we're really talking about the city, like the organization in the city. And now the organization may play a part in this too. There may be players that don't like the organization that is the Memphis Grizzlies. Some of that we may not be aware of or privy to. But I do think that the ranking of the team, the success of the team, is second or third or fourth even when it comes to what these conversations are having.
Why do you think Memphis keeps becoming a talking point nationally? Because it seems like we said, like every month we have Draymond on the hotels, LeBron on the hotels, Anthony Edwards on the hotels. It just seems like it's always something about Memphis. And I'm trying to figure out why. Where did that come from? Because it seemed like it just came out of left field.
Well, let's just keep it real. If you'd been talking to LeBron and said, you know, I heard you don't want to go play in Indiana, he would have said something about Indiana, right?
Yeah.
Like where Memphis becomes a talking point because it was already a talking point.
Yeah.
And so if you're those, and I don't even call them journalists, those guys running around trying to get sound bites and trying to get viral clips, they're going to ask questions in a way to spark the answer that they know is going to get a response. So it's easier to make Memphis kind of the easy target because you know they're going to respond. If I'm asking Draymond if I can ask Draymond anything, and I know how he feels about hotels, I'll go ahead and ask him about hotels if I want to get a quote, something that's going to hit, because I know he's going to say something about, you know, Memphis or whatever. And I think that some of that plays into maybe a lack of journalistic integrity on how some of this stuff is being brought up. But again, old, new, future, those are all different things. What Memphis was 5 years ago even with crime rate and some of the problems compared to what Memphis is now with crime rate and some of the problems compared to where Memphis will be in 2 to 3 years with crime rate and some of the problems. Those are all three different areas that I think people have to keep in mind.
What to me is interesting, and I've seen this on social media, is Zach Kleiman, the Grizzlies GM, and Robert Pera, the Grizzlies owner, have not said a word about any of this. And to me, I think that's telling because, yeah, we media members ask players and we ask coaches when they come in, and they, for the most part, defend Memphis. But if you got the two head guys in charge of the franchise not coming out and doing anything, that's telling. And I think that's kind of where the frustration is getting in with, like, the fans, because it's like, man, you see us getting crapped on social media and on media and everything, and y'all not doing anything about it to help change the perception.
But what would you want him to do? I mean, what's going to happen? He come out and say Draymond's an idiot? You know, like,
no, but you really stand for your city just like how the fans are.
But in their minds, and I'll play devil's advocate
because
here,
Milwaukee did it.
In their minds, they are standing for the city in the right way, in that all of the community engagement and community involvement they do. Like, who cares what? And this is just kind of how in this business, in the business we're in, you can't care about if somebody likes your hair or if they like your tie, because if you worry about that every day, somebody's not going to like what you're wearing or doing. And you'll spend your entire life worried about what other people think about what you're doing when you know you're doing it right. And I think that when you're running a business like that, because don't get me wrong, the Grizzlies is still business. You know, It's basketball, but it's business. You're running a business like that, and you come out and start trying to defend or deflect or give whatever about what some player says. You're talking about owners responding to players. I pay you. You take the money. If I'm the big dog on the block, I don't care what the lower person says. You know, it doesn't matter because they're the player. They're not the owner. They're not the management. They're not the one running things. They can get traded from side to side all day long. And so I think at some level when you're looking at things from 50,000 feet up, you let that stuff go for two reasons. Why? You don't play into it, number one, because now I keep that conversation going. Now it's still going. Whereas if I just don't say anything, it's going to die within 24 hours.
But wouldn't it impact their bottom dollar because now they can't get guys to want to come play for the team that could make the team better? Because, I mean, let's be honest. If the Grizzlies want to be better, they have to rely on the draft or, a trade. As Stephen A. Smith said, the best players aren't coming to play for Memphis as a free agent.
So
that's why I'm saying where I feel like the ownership and GM has to do better to kind of like help change that narrative.
Do I think that there has to be a thoughtful response at times to yes, but it's probably more internal than external. Hey, I really want this player to come. We want to sign this guy. And internally, I'm going to have private conversation with him about how things have changed. I'll show him. When you go on a job interview, when we go to job interviews in this business, they fly us to the city. They show us all the great things about the city. They tell us the things that we need to know about that might not be great, but they emphasize all the great things. That's the same thing they do when they fly in a prospective free agent. They're going to bring him in and say, look, I know you've heard X, Y, and Z, but here's the numbers. Here's what it really looks like. Here's what it's like to really live in the city. You don't have to do that externally. You're doing that internally when you're trying to bring somebody in. And I think Stephen A. says stuff that Stephen A. don't always know about. I think Stephen A. says nobody wants to go over there when that's not the truth. Think about all the great players who have come through Memphis.
But for the most part, how did they come? They came through trades or draft. Mark Gasol, trade. Zach Randolph, trade. Tony Allen, trade.
They've had a lot of success in that way. So, but even if you're talking about free agents, you said, okay, well, man, we really need a free agent to come and play for us. Those guys are still businessmen. So it's not necessarily always the city as far as Memphis itself. It might be the market size and the potential for other income in the market size. I can't tell you how many players. Oklahoma City struggled to get free agents for the longest time because people looked at it like a small market. I don't want to go there. It's a small market.
But then people still would be like, all right, I'm going to go team up with KD or Westbrook or Paul George or stuff like that. And now they'll go team up with Shea. Now Presti's like, we don't need you. We good over here. We don't need you. We good. But see, one thing, I want to keep going on that. So you hear oftentimes in free agency that people will go sign with Florida teams, Texas teams. Those teams are tax-free.
Yes.
It's also tax-free here in Tennessee.
Correct.
Why does that not come up? Because that was a selling point for me, and I don't make multi-million dollars.
Yeah, you're right. And so now you keep in mind how they're taxed, right? So they're taxed based on the city that they play in for any particular game. So your games in Tennessee are tax-free. But your games in California are overtaxed. So there's also the issue of playing in the Western Conference as opposed to the Eastern Conference, based on what the tax rates are in the cities that you're going to have to play in. So yes, you're right. Being able to sell Tennessee as a tax-free state is a selling point that I'm sure is made to agents.
And low cost of living.
Internally. Again, these are internal conversations. What does it look like if Zach Kleiman's coming out? He's the big dog for the Grizzlies, and he's coming out and having to defend, well, here's why you should come, and here's why we want you to come, and here's all the things you don't know about. To me, like, that's, It almost looks like it's.
I mean, the
almost
optics
overkill.
would look better, though, than him saying nothing.
To who? Him saying nothing to me is perfectly fine because you don't have to. If I live in Memphis, you don't have to convince me. If I'm coming to Memphis for a job, we're going to have that conversation internally.
Anyway,
yeah, you know, that's a conversation that's going to be had. So these guys, don't let the hype fool you. The money will motivate the player. I don't care what anybody tells you. The money, people have been playing in Cleveland forever.
Yeah, but it was LeBron.
Before LeBron, people have been playing in Detroit.
Yeah, Larry
when
Nance
Detroit
and them.
wasn't a great city to live in, right? Like people play in the cities where they're going to get paid. Now, can Memphis always afford to pay what they're going to have to with some of the big contracts that they already have? Maybe not. That might be a bigger hindrance than the city and the image of the city.
Well, let's talk about contracts. And last thing I want to touch on this. Ja Morant is the face of the Grizzlies, for lack of a better term. No matter what, he is still the face of the Grizzlies. And obviously, he's polarizing to the public because of his issues that he's had off the court. Do you think Ja's national image affects how Memphis gets discussed? Because they look at a player like that, off-court issues, and then a city like Memphis that has historically had a high crime rate, and then they just put two and two together like, okay, we don't want nothing, no part of that.
No, I mean, the player is individual from the city and the franchise, and I think the franchise has done a good job of at least making sure people know that we don't agree and approve with what Ja Morant's been doing. And to be fair, Ja hasn't had any off-court incidents in a while.
In a while, I know.
I mean, it's been a while, and he was young, and he was young and dumb and made some mistakes. We're all young and dumb and make mistakes at some point. So I think at some point people have to say, all right, you know, the past is the past with Ja. If Ja was to come back next year and let's say they decide to keep him for draft reasons, it all works out and they need to keep him on the roster, and he comes back with a fresh thought and a fresh, energy. He hadn't had any off-the-court issues for anybody to talk about anymore. Like you could leave that in the past and just focus on the future. I don't think that Ja's issues 2 to 3 years ago are a hindrance to getting people to come play for the Grizzlies now. I think players hesitate to play for the Grizzlies because of the size of the market.
Yeah,
not
it is the
necessarily.
smallest market in the NBA.
Yes, if I'm going to go somewhere, you have to think about what happens off the court as well. What kind of endorsements can I get in the city that I'm living in?
I was going to ask about that.
And so I think that plays a much bigger part in the issue of getting players to come to Memphis than it does as far as like, oh, well, it's a high crime city. We lived in Indiana, bro. We lived in Indianapolis. I'm telling you, Indianapolis has some serious crime.
Yeah.
Now, is it pretty? And they do a good job of cleaning it up and hiding some areas?
It's boring?
Nah, it's not. But it's such a night. Now it sucks because it's cold all the time. But like when you're talking about crime, Indy has some real crime. They got some real crime issues. Excuse me. But so it's not like these players don't know that there's crime everywhere in all these cities.
It just seems like the Grizzlies went from lovable underdog to polarizing fast, and I don't know if that
Ja played a part in that.
Villain era,
Yes.
like with Ja and Dylan and Jaren,
Yes.
where they were kind of like cocky and people didn't really appreciate them.
Yeah, people don't like the bad boy, the Detroit Pistons bad boy thing anymore, because you want your kids to be able to look up to the players. And so that era of the NBA is gone.
Yeah.
The league does not want that.
Quick thing, since you brought up the bad boys and Ja in that villain era, obviously that was back when they were a playoff team. They're not a playoff team now, but if you're still a basketball fan, man, you got to be loving what's going on in the NBA playoffs.
Yeah, I think the NBA playoffs are so much fun right now. Honestly, this is when I love watching the NBA right now.
Yeah.
These games are competitive. Even when the game doesn't get out of hand until the back end at some point. Right now, I have seen a couple of butt whoopings, during some of the earlier rounds. But like right now, those games are so competitive and they're fighting for every possession. I love it. I love that kind of NBA.
Real quick, which remaining team would Grizzlies fans realistically want to model Memphis after? I think we both said OKC.
OKC
you
is
still
the
rock
one.
with that?
Yeah, Oklahoma City is a very similar, maybe not demographically, but Oklahoma City, but size-wise and market size and just the ability to attract players and the love for basketball. Oklahoma City loves basketball, right?
Yeah.
Oklahoma's a football state, but Oklahoma City particularly loves basketball. They've embraced
Loud
the Thunder.
city.
And I think Memphis is such a basketball city that if you just give people a little something to love, man, they're going to come all for it. So I would say probably the Thunder. If you're talking about model for success, I would say probably the Thunder.
Thunder are in the playoffs, and they'll be in the playoffs for years to come.
Yeah,
and they
they're
built
probably gonna
that
get beat by
team
the Spurs,
through the
though.
draft, which the Grizzlies will want to model themselves after. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I talked NBA draft with one of the NBA draft's best when it comes to the Memphis Grizzlies. Stay close.